and welcome to Journeys and Journals. Del Norte County, and this book's been around, it says territory. So let's ask my guest about what it was like to be a little girl in Del Norte County. Well, it's not about her, it's about her mom.
Yep.
Welcome to Better Life Television.
I'm glad to be here, Bernie.
And you are?
I'm Marilyn Pfaendler. I was a Thayer when I was in Crescent City. My father was Alan Thayer, and my mother was Frida Ellen Thayer. She was a Carter, born on West Side Road in Kirby in 1896.
Oh, wow. And Mother loved history. Is that right?
Oh, yes.
Well, she's kept all these treasures from
all over everything for years. There's a lot of postcards and things from that area and that era.
And what are these actually?
Well, her father's gold scales, I think, are in there.
This is an inventory?
Yes, it is.
Of
things that she gave to the museum in Kirby.
How nice to have it all here. Now, Marilyn, when I met you, you lived out in what? Cave Junction?
Yes.
Rural Cave Junction, right?
Well, just a couple of miles out of town.
And that place had been home for how long?
Well, I had lived on it, about 60 years then, 50 or so.
Wow. How many acres?
Well, there was about 14 now. I bought the first acre and paid for that, and then used that for collateral to get some more, and kept doing that till I wound up with a good piece of it.
And right now, where does this Del Norte County come in if you lived there and Mom was from there?
Well, because actually I was raised in Crescent City. We lived there during the winter and came over to Cave Junction in the summertime to raise a garden, because you couldn't get corn and tomatoes to ripen well in the dampness of the coast.
So that's how it comes to be that this beautiful...
That's the lighthouse of Crescent City.
And how do you happen to come by this?
I painted it.
Oh, you did the work yourself?
Yes, I did all of that.
What can you tell me about this lighthouse?
Well, it's a museum now, but I remember when it helped keep the ships off the shoals and things. And during the low tide, you could walk out to it. I think you still can. But from that particular perspective, you had to be standing on the jetty, the breakwater. And
this is what you remember as a girl, and now you've gone back and painted it?
Oh, it's still there. I haven't been through the museum there yet. It's been quite a few years since I've been over there. But this one is sealed rock that I never saw, of course, but I knew a man who worked on it.
You did?
It was so treacherous they couldn't even land a ship on that rock. But that was 3 miles offshore from Point St. George. But I remember the light flashing.
And how in the world, if they couldn't get him out there?
Well, they had to shoot a line over and go over and on the cable.
These are gorgeous. And did you have a photograph to go with?
I had a couple of little tiny pictures. But it wasn't from that. Somebody had a postcard.
And so you just sketched the...
I drew them up and then I painted them.
Well, now it's on fabric. It's not regular paint, is it?
It's an oil paint. It was Artex. It was a textile paint in a ballpoint tube, painted on everything.
Now you've painted on a few things.
This is Pellon. This was samples, you might say Christmas card samples. I taught people how to paint, and I thought if they did things like this for themselves, they would get more confidence in doing some of the great big pictures and things.
Like these?
Yeah, but the company sold stamp pictures, but this was...
You mean like embroidery stamps that you used to get tea towels with a picture on them?
Oh, yeah, but they sold the towels with already stamped to paint.
Oh.
And my position was if they got more paints rather than just bought the material before they knew how to do it, they would be happier and more successful. And that's why I developed what I called a freehand creative painting.
Now, the idea, I mean, you had these classes where?
Party plan
Oh,
at people's homes.
okay. Kind of Avon, kind of
Yeah,
like a
like Tupperware and things like that.
Tupperware party. And
See-
these are all patterns that people could,
Yeah, so they could just make something out of nothing. Basically, I was lazy, and
did you put this whole book together?
yes, I did the whole thing. My son published it for me. At that time, he had a publishing company, printing, and
Oh, you,
took me about 5 minutes to scribble off that cover because he said, "What did I have for a cover?" And I said, "Nothing." And he handed me a piece of paper and said, "Make something."
and there you are.
All of those little pieces are, they're shown how to make them back inside.
You know, you're a genius when it comes to art. You have ever so many different art forms that you do.
Yes, my mother, of course, was very much an artist, too. Oh, this is one of the little,
Oh, I like it. I like love. Any way you cut it, I like love.
some of the paint and things. And this I painted on a mirror.
Oh, well
So
now,
that's just a freehand on there with it was a raised clear paint, and then it's a glass paint that went inside.
besides art, you've had many other interests.
Oh, a lot of them.
And now I find you in the wheelchair. We can talk about that.
Well, it started several years ago when I thought I was going to have spine surgery, and my right knee was swollen, and the doctor that was scheduled for surgery for me in Medford said the knee bothered him. Fat women have blood clots. Cancel the surgery. Just like that. That's all right. And I went back home, and I'd kind of lost the ability to do a lot of things. And one of the health nurses said, that hurts me to look at it. Go in the hospital and get that x-rayed. Well, we'd x-rayed, CAT scanned, MRI, everything on the spine, but never thought to look at the legs. And they did that in at Three Rivers, and the doctor that looked at the x-rays said both knees and both hips should have been replaced 3 or 4 years ago. So we started. First the left hip, or my right hand, that's the right hip. Then we did the left hip, and then the right knee. So far, I still have one knee that is not titanium.
Okay, but they don't work real well
They work pretty well, yes.
because you've moved from your home out there in Illinois Valley. Do you say Illinois? Or?
Yeah,
I just, and you've moved into a care facility.
into Royal Gardens.
But you're not wasting your time there at all.
Well, I hope not.
I found this lady reading her book. What's the name of this book?
That is Letters from an Oregon Ranch.
Fascinating book. Those people come in once a week for this
On Saturdays.
the cereal.
Yeah. And this book was printed in 1905, and this lady in Iowa bought this one in 1905. So this is just about a first edition.
Wow.
It's a wonderful story of two middle-aged couples that sold their fancy homes back east because they read a little brochure about Oregon and fell in love with it. And of course, they had to hit Oregon in the middle of the worst stormy winter. And it goes on and on.
Let me see your book. And so you read a chapter every week.
I read for an hour
Oh, okay.
every other week or so, and I still
Lovely.
have a little bit to go yet on that. Then I'm going to read some other things. I'll start with the Mitford series when I get through with this, because there's a lady reading that on Mondays, and some of the people have missed that. So I've asked her permission to start at the beginning, and I won't pass her, but I'll double up on what she's read.
Oh, what a good idea. You have other I mean, you've been in a senior residence for,
Off and on. About, 6 years ago, I guess, was the first time I was in for quite a while. And when I came back in the last time, one of the ladies was being wheeled down, and she pointed her finger at me and said, "I know you. You read to me."
wonderful to be known for that. Now, I first met you while you were living out.
I was still in Cave Junction, I think.
Yeah, what's that road you lived on?
Rockydale.
Rockydale.
It used to be the main highway to Crescent City.
That I wanted to hear about. So you tell me the story.
Well, it came out Old Stage Road, crossed the river, it came out Rockydale, and then went on out through O'Brien and Lone Mountain Valley and came way around out at Patrick's Creek. That was way back when.
Did Mom ever tell you about that road?
Well, probably I was over it at one time when I was small, but then when they put 199 in, the switchbacks up on the Oregon Mountain, oh my, break a snake trying to crawl up that. You look down and see where you were and or where you were going. And bless his heart, my father was a rascal in lots of ways. He had a 1.5-ton truck, and he just loved to go from the top of that. He'd kick it out of gear and coast down that, whirling around there. I was ready to jump. My sister was jumping up and down, screaming and yelling, more, more, more. She loved it.
And that was a regular trip every year, two?
Well, maybe several times in a year, possibly.
Because you had to go from home in Crescent City over to Garden and...
In Cave Junction, but they owned property, and to begin with, we had 2 tents, one to sleep in and one to do a little cooking in. And the wind blew and the rains came, so my dad put a frame to hold it still, and then he had some old tin that came off of something, and he put a roof over it, and eventually it wound up being 2 little cabins. A wood cook stove out in the yard, and a well just not too far away from it.
This is ingenious. This is pioneer spirit.
Oh, yes, it was. And we had to be careful. The little swamp that went by there was definitely a swamp. And I've seen horses and cows get mired and go clear out of sight.
Oh, and they didn't want any little girl going out of sight. This is the way you have brought so many things. How can we cover it all? Del Norte County. I see that right there on the top.
This is a fascinating book. Goes clear way back. One thing I found real interesting in the history of things, it tells about a storm, a bad storm, a swell they called it. They didn't know what tsunami was, but the water covered exactly the same territory that the tsunami covered.
Oh, and you have stories about the tsunami that happened in our time.
Yes, it did. I was not there at that time, but this is the husband that I was married to at the time. But no, I was not his wife when he was the harbor master there.
Okay, what's his
That's
name?
Henry Pfaendler.
And Henry was the harbor master when the tsunami?
But you see, he had his sister living in Alaska, and she called to tell him there had been a horrible earthquake, but she was okay. And he had been a navigator for Union Oil for many years, and he knew the waves and the water and the courses and tides, and he figured there'd pretty well chance to be something like that. So he was in his office on the dock, clearing out his desk, when he called his mother and said, "The water is sucking out of the bay. It's going to happen." And so he left right then, but he stayed around to help fish out the people that were dumb enough to stay. And
you know, those stories, they had been warned to get out of town. Because you could see this sounds like something in recent history out in the Pacific, doesn't it?
Well, he knew the Pacific. He had been all over it. Years ago when, just about the time I was born, I think. See, he was almost 19 years older than I am. And he worked on a millionaire's yacht. Captain Fred Lewis had the Stranger is the name of it. He's got a big plaque in the San Diego Zoo out in front. He was a millionaire philanthropical guy that took the cream of the crop of the Sea Scouts, and he'd take some every year. They'd go out in the Galapagos Islands and collect tortoises for the museum and fish for the Steinhardt Aquarium, and all over everything, clear down South America and then to Alaska with some of them.
And his job was to be on that ship?
He was a crew, one of the crew, and I did get invited to what would have been the 55th reunion, but he had died just the year before, and but they paid my way down to Balboa or Huntington Beach. In fact, the Huntington Beach Maritime Museum has lots of things from that ship, and even Henry's picture is there with a bunch of the boys. And I was pleased to be one of the honored guests, and got to meet, they were young boys then, but they got to talking and maybe hit the little bar a couple of times, and those in their 70s and 80s, they thought they were 17 and 18 again. And I think in the morning they hurt in places they'd forgot they had. They were doing the hula and
It must have been fun, but because you're talking a long time ago. These
yes,
ships,
they all loved it, and they remembered him. He gave one of them a camera, and he had a wind-up Victrola, and he played classical music.
on the boat
Yes.
ship must have been, as you said, very generous, very generous. Now, there's a little bit about you that I just learned. That's you're a poet,
Well, I do like to write poetry.
and you'll write any poet at a drop of a hat.
Well, even more than that. You don't have to drop the hat. I'll write a poem about that.
Then I'll expect a poem about Better Life TV.
Well, I'll get one. You better know it. But this is one that I wrote when I was down on B Wing there. I was looking out the window, and it was raining real hard. The rain comes falling from the sky and dances on the street, then runs together down the hill, although it has no feet. It keeps on falling all day long. It doesn't seem to hurry. But if people have to go outside, they duck their heads and scurry. It's nice to stay indoors today and look out through the glass and know that in a day or two this little storm will pass. The clouds will leave, the sun will make a warm and lovely day, and little kids and puppy dogs can go outside and play.
Oh, I love it, I love it, I love it. And you just sit there and write about whatever's in front of you.
Yeah, I do.
I love it. Now, before you get too far away, tell me more about the coast. Have you written a poem about that?
It hasn't been lately, but I probably did years ago, and because my mother did things like that too.
Oh, she did?
Yes, she wrote poetry and something about the snow go away. She didn't like it.
I
She
actually
had a logbook. My niece has that, and she kept logs of everything and wrote. But
I was on the coast one day and woke up with snow in Brookings. I
but
thought,
it's a slushy type of snow there.
well, it was right out by the ocean, and I
Yep.
couldn't believe my eyes.
Oh, it does it. And
My friend Janet lived right out on the
yep,
water's edge, I guess you'd say. So you've seen snow over there. Doesn't
Well,
happen
oh,
very
yes.
often. It's usually rain
well, I didn't want to go out because it was slushy. You
rain
couldn't
and
make a decent snowman.
Oh dear. But in
But I did run into some snow up in the hills out of Brookings. For a while, I lived 16 miles up out of Brookings, right by the low water bridge on the Chetco, and it just happened that man got mad at me and burned my house down, and I had to walk back in to be sure there was no bodies in the remains. That was interesting.
No.
Well, I walked in, we had to walk in 5 miles, and somebody was able to drive back a little ways, trees across the road and things. Because I was living up in there at the time the flood took out Klamath.
Right. That was a terrible flood, 19 and...
Well, where I was up there, I had battery radios and clocks and Coleman lanterns and a wood cook stove, so my lifestyle didn't change a bit during that.
A pioneer woman, indeed.
Oh, yes.
Well, I want to know all about what else you've written, what else, where do you... I heard her do one of these poems one time at the... Well, they don't call them rest homes anymore, but it...
Well, I've done lots of them there. This is one that is going to be in the Gazette for the county fair. It hasn't been published there yet. The Josephine County Fair. Have you ever gone to our county fair? It's so much fun to just be there. Flowers and hobbies and booths galore. You're sure to find what you're looking for. Beautiful animals, you must know what it means to the 4-H show. Good foods to eat and lots to drink. There is more to see than you might think. God has provided a harvest bounty. I'm glad I live in Josephine County.
Yes, ma'am. And that's where, now were you actually born out in Illinois?
I was born in Crescent City.
Oh, okay.
And
Woman of the sea.
both, everything. But I probably learned to crawl in the dust in Cave Junction, I don't know.
Depending on, now this book you've brought, what's the story?
Well, I borrowed a book by that name from the Stockton Library years ago. And I loved it so much, it just kind of fell in my suitcase when I moved back up here. And about 2 years later, when I went back to Stockton, my conscience killed me, and I took it back. And just as I let go of it to go through the slot, I thought, no, I should have gone in and told them I lost it and paid for it. But it was too late, and I wasn't going in to borrow that again. No way. And I finally found a book advertised, you know, find any book in print. So I wrote that and another one that I wanted, and I got it.
Tell me about the stories in here.
Oh, the stories are wonderful. How they don't know anything about anything. They go through 20 miles of mud to get up. I think they were just on the inside of the Coast Range, because on a real high storm they could hear the ocean. But they didn't know anything about it. The only hint they had of it is one of the men had this mythical life with his Uncle Jim. He spent one summer on his uncle's farm. So no matter what it is, he knew all about that because what was Uncle Jim's.
He could grow a crop because of Uncle Jim.
Oh, yeah. And to milk a cow, except eventually he learned how. And how to find chickens. So they managed to get all of the things that they needed.
Now, we talked about Henry.
Yep.
But inside this little...
Some more little tiny things that I'd painted.
You're not slowing down, are you? Oh, they look like Christmas ornaments to me.
Well, those were refrigerator magnets. I did a lot for Wilderness House, a little company that was there in Cave Junction for a long time. And I did those for, I don't know, I did hundreds of them.
California, and this looks like an Oregon one.
Yeah, on both sides. I cut my own stencils, versatile stencils, so I could use them either way and change the whole scene. So I could do 50 of them and no two would be the same.
And did you cut the wood too?
No, they brought me the pieces. I had to sand them down.
Okay, but this isn't wood.
No, that's on the non-woven pellon. Those are for either Christmas ornaments or to put on a brooch or something.
Oh my goodness, yeah, there's those mice ready for Christmas. Yep. In your future, what do you see in your bright future, besides reading for these people?
Well, I don't know. I'll teach whatever I can and do what I can.
Including?
Well, I can do the candle wicking, I suppose. I haven't done it for a while. I used, it's called a colonial knot rather than just a French knot. It's a little flatter and a little fatter. And it
I
works.
don't know how to do a colonial, but I do know how to do a French knot.
Well, it kind of, you hook the needle under the thread and then go over it, and it cinches down just a little fatter.
Because this, what about candle wicking? Does it really come from the wick of a candle?
It did in the first place. Now you can use anything. But it's because the men were frugal with their money, of course, in the early pioneer days, and so they didn't want to spend money for their wives' frivolous occupations. So, but they had to have wicking to dip for candles, and the women were smart enough to unravel some and use it to do things. In fact, that's where our chenille bedspreads came from. They would do that on a sheet, but the only thing is, if they washed it, they put it out to dry, and they would station some of their children there to watch, to be sure that the neighbors didn't slip over there with another sheet, put over the top of it, touch it with bluing, and get their patterns.
Oh, wow. What happens here?
That was a needle punch. You work that from the back. And
Okay, let's do it. Oh
Yep.
my, those must be the eyes.
Yep. But each one of those is punch, 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 punch. Like the bow is kind of interesting because it's checkered. So you use two different colors.
You're a genius. I just thank you so much. You know, when I get a call that says, you know, I watch Better Life TV, and I have something I'd like to share, I jump at the idea. You are so kind to have brought all this today.
Well, I'm very happy to have done so. And just some of the little freehand things that are so easy. And
simple for
that
her.
good Yule, that's Norwegian, till dig till New Year. And so simple to just do that and just make little things, little designs.
So simple.
It is.
You
And
had
I had a lot of fun teaching people how to do something that they didn't know they could do.
now you have one more. This is we just ran out of time. I'm so sorry. I hope you'll come back another time. I'm
Well-
Bernie Martin Beck saying thank you very much.